Hey guys, Chief Meteorologist Kendra here to talk about one of my favorite topics. It's fall color in the upstate and the mountains. You know, it's funny, growing up in South Texas, we just didn't get the kind of color that you see here. It has been incredible. Since I moved here, the fall seasons that I've seen have been remarkable, and I'm sure it's one of your favorite times of year. If you're clicking on this, you probably really do love that fall color. I'm going to real quick get up so I can see your comments, and then we'll get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about why it all happens, and then also go into depth about when to go see some of that color, because you know, it can be a different times of year, different times of October into November. It can be best in the upstate as well as in the mountains. So really quite an incredible sight. All right, let's see if somebody's on here. All right, we got some folks saying hello today. All right, let me make sure I can see that. Hey, Faye. Thanks for being on here. And all right, so what causes the fall leaves to change? Well, as you would imagine, it's all about it cooling down. Less daylight equals cooler temperatures, and that's what really spurs along the fall color. Sorry, hold on a second. Let me see. I think got a little disconnected there from the comments. Okay, so less daylight, more color, and what that equals is basically that time where the color begins to shift from green to that orangish red. You're going to see a lot less of the bright green because of the fact that they're not getting that sunlight. Basically, the food that creates the chlorophyll that ends up helping to spur along the beautiful green color, and it ends up going to that orange and red color. So you can see here, let me see if I can get this to go right. A couple of my things not working right on me. All right, here we go. So the chlorophyll basically breaks down. So we go from that green to eventually an orange and a red when we're getting less sunlight. So that's really the key. We're not seeing as much in the way of sunny days. The days are getting shorter, and those cooler nights really begin to get the fall color going. So that's kind of the scientific process behind the whole thing. But also, the other issue is that as we start to see a little bit of the cooler temperature settling in, that will also bring out some of the leaves falling. So if it gets really cool really quickly, that can sometimes limit how much we see. So we're going to talk about how weather plays a factor as well. So if you're just hopping on, less daylight and cooler temperatures really is what kind of drives the process. Chlorophyll is what breaks down. The chlorophyll is what is inside the plants, basically feeding them. Get it from the sunlight. You get less sunlight, less of that. You go from green to orange to red, and then you lose that green color, and that transition happens. That's what we all love to see this time of year. So I'm going to see if our director can take this full, and we'll go through exactly when to go look at some of this fall color across our area. So in the last week of September, really it's starting to peak about right now over toward the Blue Ridge Parkway, and those elevations at about 5,000 feet. So you have to go really high to see some of that fall color toward middle to late-ish September. But by the time we get into early October, you start to see that transition where you begin to see it over toward Mount Mitchell, Grandfather Mountain, and eventually toward Mount Pisgah as we get toward the second week. And again, this can vary by a few days, but in general, this is kind of the time frame that we're looking at. So Blue Ridge Parkway, Cashers, Waynesville area can see some of that fall color between about 4,000 and 5,000 feet. And then the third week of October, 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Best colors around Little Switzerland, Brevard, Table Rock, Bryson City, Pisgah National Forest. So you still got a good bit of time to see a lot of great color in the mountains. It's really just starting. That's one of the reasons we were going to do this podcast kind of ahead of time to give you that heads up. The fourth week of all this beautiful fall color in October, you can go up to Asheville, the French Broad River Valley. Biltmore, stroll around the North Carolina Arboretum, DuPont State Park, and then the first week of November, that's when it tends to start pushing down into the northern part of the upstate, also the foothills and areas like Marion, Rutherfordton, Tryon, and foothills wine country. So there's a lot of areas that begin to see the beautiful color, and then eventually you'll start to see it across the upstate into that early November timeframe. Really, it's a lot of times around Halloween when we begin to see some great color. So in your foliage update, we're already starting to see some color above 3,500 feet. You have to go farther down in elevation after about mid to late October. We'll start to see some beautiful color outside of the mountains, but that's kind of just a general rule when it comes to how much color you can see. But it's a amazing process, and if you're just hopping on, I was talking about how I grew up in Southeast Texas, where we just didn't get that kind of fall color. You just don't see that huge change. And I moved to Arkansas for my first television job. We was up in the Ozarks, and I began to get a taste of what that fall color is like. But I truly believe there's nothing quite like the North Carolina mountains to see that changeover. But it's pretty amazing in the upstate too. I'll never forget my parents coming to visit my first year I was living here, and we drove all around the mountains. It was sometime in late October, I believe. We drove around the mountains looking at the fall color. When we drove back to my apartment, and my dad said, I think this is the prettiest fall color we've seen so far, because actually the upstate can get pretty good too, especially in spots into early November. So a lot of great times to be had for sure coming up. Now, when it comes to what influences this beautiful color that we love to get out and see, well, it's interesting, and some of it can be a little confusing. We're going to kind of go through this. The best thing to have around the time that transition happens, clear sunny days, you want to have as much sunlight as you can so that when the sun goes down, it cools fast. You get that contrast of day and night, and that really helps to drive the process. Also, clear, chilly nights are important. You want a good drop in temperatures at night. That helps to spur along the fall color. So from both of these, you would deduce that you want some pretty nice, fairly dry weather. But you don't want it to be too dry leading up to leaf season. If it's a drought by chance, you'd have a bunch of dead leaves and they're not going to turn color. So if it's incredibly dry through the summer into the fall, chances are you're not going to see as good of a show as if you'd had a regular amount of rain leading up to leaf season. So essentially, rain diminishes the color. Another factor is if it's raining a good bit during the time that the process is happening, the cloud cover will limit how much sunlight is seen and absorbed, and then there won't be as big of a contrast between day and night. So if you've got a lot of rain happening during that process, it'll diminish the color too. So essentially, you just want it to be fairly dry from about mid-September through October, and that tends to be couple of our drier months around here. Unless we get a tropical system, we're typically not going to see a whole lot in the way of rain, even though we've had a good bit lately. And what we're seeing was from a tropical system, Nicholas, that's still continuing to bring moisture through the southeast. And then tomorrow's rain is going to be from a cold front that should really help to get some temperatures down and maybe help that fall color along in the mountains as we get toward the very end of September. So if you're just joining me, I'm going to go back through some of this, and I'll go through your comments too. My laptop is behaving better now. It was jumping around on me, so it's hard to see your comments. Hey, Jim, and hey, Adara and April. April saying that she loves fall. And Sue saying beautiful fall colors. Oh, I agree. It's one of my favorites. So we're going to back up the graphics real quick, and I'm just going to kind of recap everything. I was mentioning that, we're all kind of lucky to live in this area because there are many places that just don't see the kind of leaf season that we get around here. It's a really lucky thing to have. And weather can have a big role in that. If we had weather like what we have out today, it could really mess with the whole process. If it was a really wet time from late September through October, that could really shorten leaf season. It also prolong it a bit, but I don't think the colors would be quite as bright. You want clear, sunny days. You want really nice weather. And luckily, we typically get that in late September into October. So less daylight, cooler temperatures, that's what really spurs along the change in the fall color. The chlorophyll in the leaf, it breaks down when it doesn't get as much sunshine. And because of that, the leaves begin to change. They lose that green color and then they transition to red and yellow. And I broke this down too, and you can always pause this graphic, as you're watching this, rewatching this video later if you want to read it in more depth. We're just showing you how the higher terrain starts to change over as we get into the last week of September, or at least peaks toward then. And then you begin to see the color as it go down in elevation a bit, so that by around the third week of October, areas like Brevard, Table Rock, Bryson City seeing some really great color. And then as we look toward the fourth week of October, closer to Halloween, that's when Asheville, French Broad River, Biltmore, areas like that would be seeing some really beautiful color. And then into November, that's when it all starts to bleed down into the upstate and those lower terrain areas in western North Carolina like Rutherfordton and the foothills. So right now you're seeing a little bit of color above 3,500 feet, begins in early to mid-October in the upstate. That's when you start to see a little bit of that color, but the real peak comes toward the end of the month. And what influences that color? Well, it's those clear, sunny days. We want that to be really prevalent when the transition begins, because of the fact that the process is so dependent on the transition from day to night and the losing of the sunlight. So clear, chilly nights are also really good for it, but rain can diminish the color effect. If you have a bunch of rain leading up or potentially during the process, it keeps the process from happening as efficiently. So, it's tough to get a stretch like what we've had, but after we get rid of the rain on Wednesday, we're going to have perfect conditions really for that fall color to begin to blossom and really explode across western North Carolina as we get into the last week of September, early October. So those will be really good times to go up to the higher terrain and take a look. And then later in October, that's when it'll start to kind of head down into the Asheville area and then eventually into the upstate by early November. So thank you guys for being on here. Stella saying that she loves fall. She wants to have a long fall season. Yeah, sometimes I feel like we tend to go from summer to winter really fast. We don't have a lot of those really crisp, perfect fall days. Hi, Tracy and Judy. Thanks for being on today. I know there are a bunch more comments of yours. For some reason, it's not, or maybe it'll let me do it if I click on this. I can't see a few of them, but I'm going to get back on and answer as many questions as I can related to our fall color. But yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do around here. I've got 3 kids, and none of them are that excited about the fall color. I feel like it'd be hard to take them on a long drive down the Blue Ridge Parkway, but they love to do things like apple pick and go up for those kind of activities. So I feel like I can benefit from looking at the color while taking them to do things like that. But anyway, I'll get on and answer any of your questions and leave any comments about any topics you want me to tackle for World of Weather. I'd love to. You can email us weather@foxcarolina.com. But we thought this would be a very appropriate topic as we're getting into the fall season. And we'll have more topics coming up on World of Weather. Thanks for tuning in to this Facebook Live.